Millionaire sees Stepmother forcing his daughter to kneel. His next move leaves everyone speechless. Inside the magnificent mansion, golden light from the crystal chandelier spilled across the marble floor, shimmering like the glow of a palace. Yet, in stark contrast to its opulent appearance, the atmosphere inside was suffocatingly cold, silent as though the place had long been abandoned. On the gleaming white tiles, a 6-year-old girl knelt with trembling hands and tear-stained eyes, her brown hair disheveled. This was Jasmine Carter, the only daughter of David Carter, a highly successful and wealthy real estate mogul. At that very moment, she was struggling to scrub her stepmother's high-heeled shoes. "Mom, I'm tired." Jasmine's voice came out weak and shaky, as though fading into nothingness. But instead of compassion or a comforting embrace, what she received was a harsh, merciless shout from Anna, the woman who had once entered this house with a sweet smile, now revealing a face twisted with cruelty and disdain. "Shut up, you useless child! If you don't learn obedience, you'll never deserve to live in this house. Hurry up and clean it properly." Anna barked, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. Tears rolled down Jasmine's cheeks, mixing with the dust from the marble floor. Her tiny hands shook as she clutched the ragged cloth, desperately trying to please a woman who would never be satisfied. At that exact moment, the grand door burst open. The sound of polished leather shoes echoed across the vast foyer. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a perfectly tailored suit strode inside. David Carter, the head of a renowned real estate empire, the father Jasmine longed to cling to, had returned home earlier than expected. David had intended to stay late at a contract celebration, but midway through, an unshakable urge drove him back. He had no idea that this choice would make him witness a scene that tore his heart apart. Before him was not his daughter's innocent laughter, not the playful voice he cherished, but a small, humiliated child, kneeling in shame before her stepmother. David froze. His eyes darkened, shock quickly igniting into a suppressed fury. His breath caught in his chest as he noticed Jasmine's tiny hands, raw and reddened, her face streaked with tears. "Anna." David's voice dropped, low and ice-cold, yet trembling with the fury he struggled to contain. Anna jolted, fear flashing briefly across her face before she quickly masked it with a sweet, practiced smile. "Oh, David, you're home early. It's nothing serious, just a little lesson. The girl clumsily dirtied my shoes, and I was simply teaching her to be more careful." But to David, no excuse could hide the truth. He looked at Jasmine, her tearful eyes fixed on him like clinging to the last ray of hope, silently pleading, "Daddy, save me." In that instant, David understood. The house he believed was a safe haven had become a prison of cruelty for his little girl, and he would never allow this to continue for even one more second. David stood frozen in the grand foyer, his heart pounding wildly. Before his eyes lay an undeniable truth. His little daughter was being treated like a servant right inside the very house that was supposed to be her safe haven. Jasmine turned toward her father, her tear-filled eyes flickering with a brief spark of hope before she timidly lowered her head. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I dirtied Mom's shoes." Her trembling voice confessed, as if she were the one at fault. David felt a blade twist in his chest. How could a 6-year-old child be forced to apologize in such humiliation? He stepped forward, his gaze darkening, each breath heavy with rage. "Anna, I'll ask you again. What is this?" His voice boomed through the vast hall, deep and icy, freezing the very air around them. Anna tried to remain composed, her crimson lips quivering as she forced a fake smile. "You're misunderstanding, David. I was only teaching her a lesson. The girl is too stubborn, too clumsy. If she isn't disciplined, she'll become a burden. Everything I do, it's for Jasmine's own good." David bent down, lifting Jasmine's tiny hand. He saw her small fingers, raw and red, the delicate skin marked from scrubbing. Jasmine flinched, her little shoulders trembling with fear. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice breaking apart like glass. "Please, don't ever leave me with her again. I'm so scared." Those words pierced David's heart like the sharpest blade. He remembered the recent nights when Jasmine cried in her sleep, begging not to be left alone. The time she clung to his hand, pleading, "Daddy, let me come with you. Don't make me stay with her." Shady. He had brushed it off, thinking it was just childish fear. But now the cruel truth stood bare. He had ignored his daughter's desperate cries for help. He turned to Anna, his eyes blazing with fury. "And you dare call this discipline? You turn this house into a living hell for my daughter and then disguise it as teaching her a lesson?" Anna snapped back. "David, you're spoiling her. She's weak, whiny, and without strictness, she'll never grow. You're too busy to notice. I spend more time with her. I know her better than you do." But David no longer had the patience to hear another lie. He scooped Jasmine into his arms, feeling the trembling of her tiny body, and locked eyes with Anna. "Listen carefully, Anna. You have exactly 1 hour to pack your things and leave this house. From this moment on, you will never come near my daughter again." Anna's face drained of color, her eyes widening. "You can't be serious. You'd throw me away over a child's tears? I've sacrificed for this family, preserved your image in front of everyone, and this is how you repay me." David cut her off, his voice as sharp as a blade. "Sacrifice? Preserve? What I see is cruelty. I trusted you to bring love to Jasmine, to fill the void left by her late mother. But I was wrong. The greatest mistake of my life was entrusting my daughter to a woman as heartless as you." Anna clenched her fists, her face twisting between rage and fear. But David had already turned away, holding Jasmine close. The child buried her face against his shoulder, her tears soaking his shirt. In that moment, he swore to himself, never again would his daughter kneel in humiliation. After Anna stormed out of the foyer, the slam of the door felt like the closing of a nightmare. David sank onto the long sofa, clutching Jasmine tightly in his arms. Her small body trembled like a leaf in the wind, her little hands gripping his shirt as though letting go would drag her back into the nightmare she had just escaped. "I'm here now, Jasmine. I won't let anyone scare you again." David's deep voice carried warmth, but it quivered with pain and regret. He carried her upstairs and placed her gently on the chair by the window. The crescent moon hung outside, its pale light illuminating the tears still clinging to her lashes. David brushed them away, realizing his own hand was trembling. "Sweetheart, tell me, how long has Anna been treating you this way?" His voice cracked. Jasmine hesitated, then whispered, "Mom always said I'm a burden. She said, nobody loves me. She said, Daddy goes away so much because you don't want to be near me." The innocent words fell like hammer blows against David's heart. Each syllable cut deep into his conscience. He had drowned himself in meetings and million-dollar deals, blind to the silent cries of his daughter. "No, Jasmine," David gripped her shoulders firmly, his voice shaking with emotion. "You are the most precious thing in my life. Your mother in heaven would want me to protect you. I was wrong for not listening to you sooner. But from today, it will be different. I swear to you, no one will ever hurt you again." Jasmine looked at him, her clear eyes searching his face for truth. Slowly, she nodded and nestled into his chest, whispering through her sobs, "Daddy, please don't leave me alone again." David held her close, feeling her tiny heartbeat racing against his chest. In that moment, he understood that from now on, work, money, prestige, none of it mattered compared to the one thing that did: protecting and loving Jasmine. That evening, instead of attending glittering parties, David stayed in the modest kitchen with his daughter. They shared a simple meal of soup and bread, yet to Jasmine it was the most delicious dinner she had tasted in months. For the first time in so long, she ate with genuine appetite, even smiling shyly between bites. Watching her innocent joy, David's heart overflowed. He realized he had just rediscovered something far more valuable than any million-dollar contract: his daughter's smile. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating the vast mansion. But unlike every other day, Anna's presence was gone. After a sleepless night of reflection, David had made his final decision. He ordered the staff to clear out every trace of Anna, her expensive dresses, gleaming high heels, and the designer perfumes once proudly displayed on her vanity. Each item was packed neatly into large boxes, as though erasing the very existence of the woman who had brought so much cruelty into their lives. No pleading words, no tears, only the cold resolve of a man who had endured enough pain. That same morning, David called his private lawyer. His voice was deep and unwavering. "Prepare the divorce papers. I want the process finalized as quickly as possible. I don't want a single tie to Anna anymore." Within hours, the divorce documents were delivered straight into Anna's hands. A marriage once painted with glittering appearances and lavish parties ended with a single, unfeeling signature. And David knew this was not merely the conclusion of a failed marriage. It was the beginning of a new journey, one where he and Jasmine could finally reclaim the light and peace that had been stolen from them for far too long. In the days that followed, the Carter mansion was no longer filled with shouting, no longer echoed with angry footsteps down the hallways. The atmosphere became calmer, but inside, David, a strange emptiness began to grow. He started to change his entire schedule. The late-night meetings were shortened, constant business trips were canceled. Instead of throwing himself into endless work, David reorganized everything, delegating responsibilities to his subordinates so that he could spend more time with Jasmine. Each morning he drove her to school, and every afternoon he came home early to have dinner with her. These changes made Jasmine happier, but late at night, David lay awake and faced a painful truth. Presence alone was not enough. The child who had been hurt so deeply needed more than his rushed affection. She needed a gentle hand, patient care, something that he, as a man torn between empire and fatherhood, could not fully provide every single day. Many nights, David sat silently in his study, staring at the piles of documents on his desk. His heart was torn in two. He longed to be with his daughter, yet he carried the weight of a business empire that demanded his leadership. Quit everything? He had thought about it, giving up all of it just to devote himself to Jasmine. But reason pulled him back. He still had to shoulder the burden, still had to keep the foundation strong so his daughter could have a secure future. He began to consider finding a trustworthy caretaker. But the memory of Anna made such thoughts difficult. Would he make the same mistake again? Would he once more let someone into their lives only to cause Jasmine more pain? Dozens of interviews were arranged. Some candidates were too greedy, their eyes fixed on the Carter fortune. Others were too cold, lacking patience. A few looked perfect on paper, but when they stood before Jasmine, they could not make her smile. With every disappointment, David grew more uncertain. He wondered if he would ever find someone good enough, sincere enough, to enter Jasmine's life. At times he told himself, maybe I should just do everything myself so I won't have to trust anyone ever again. But when he looked into his daughter's eyes still shadowed by the fear of past wounds, David understood he could not be so selfish. Jasmine needed another hand to guide her, a companion, a gentle light to shine when he could not be there. One evening, David leaned close to his daughter and whispered, "My little princess, I promise we'll find someone truly special, someone who will be by your side when I'm busy, someone who will give you the safety and kindness you deserve. But this time, we'll choose together. If you don't like them, They'll leave right away. I promise." Jasmine looked at her father, worry still glimmering in her eyes. Yet when she heard the words, "I promise," she slowly nodded. It was a fragile trust, but it was the beginning of a new journey. After 3 long weeks of fruitless searching, an unexpected call came. The coordinator from the agency spoke clearly over the phone. "Mr. Carter, we have one final candidate. Her name is Grace Williams. She has worked with children who've been through trauma. Her methods are quite unique." David hesitated. He was exhausted after 15 failed interviews. But something in the coordinator's confident tone made him decide to try one more time. "All right, have her come tomorrow morning." The next day, when the grand door opened, a young woman stepped inside. Grace was about 27, slender, with neatly tied brown hair, wearing a simple pale blue dress. Unlike others who gawked at the mansion's luxury, she walked calmly, her warm eyes shining. The moment she noticed Jasmine hiding behind her father, Grace didn't approach David as every other candidate had. Instead, she gently knelt down, lowering herself to the child's eye level. A soft smile curved her lips. "Hello, Jasmine. I brought you a little gift." Grace pulled from her colorful tote a vividly illustrated storybook. "These are tales of brave princesses. Do you like stories?" Jasmine hesitated, clutching her father's hand tightly, but her eyes sparkled at the bright drawings. She edged forward slightly, whispering, "I usually only hear Daddy read them." Grace's smile deepened, her gaze full of understanding. "That's right. Stories are sweetest when told by the ones we love. But if you'd like, when Daddy is busy, I could read with you. What do you think?" David stood silently, his heart unexpectedly melting. It had been so long since Jasmine had stepped forward to speak with anyone new. Yet here she was, hesitant but curious. During the formal interview afterward, Grace spoke with honesty. "Every child is a world of their own. My role is not to replace a parent's love, but to add safety, patience, and understanding." Unlike the rehearsed answers he'd heard before, Grace's words rang true, spoken from the heart. Jasmine listened quietly. As the interview drew to a close, she suddenly stepped closer to Grace. Her clear eyes searched the woman's face, and she softly asked, "Are you a good person or a bad one?" The question froze both David and Grace, but Grace did not rush. She knelt again, meeting Jasmine's gaze directly, her voice gentle. "I hope I'm a good one, but only you can decide that. If one day you feel I'm not kind to you, you can always tell your daddy, and I promise, he will believe you." Jasmine's eyes shimmered. After a pause, she whispered, "I think you're good. Your eyes are kind." In that moment, David knew something had changed. This was more than a candidate for childcare. This was a key, the key to unlocking hope in his daughter's wounded heart. And that key had a name: Grace Williams. On Grace's first official day, David was so anxious he woke at 5 a.m. He paced the halls, instructing the staff on countless trivial details. When the clock struck 7, Grace arrived right on time, carrying a well-worn, colorful backpack filled with small items for children. Her very first question surprised David. "Is Jasmine awake yet?" Not about tasks, not about schedules, but about the child herself. When Jasmine appeared at the staircase, hair tousled, still in her pink pajamas, Grace beamed brightly. "Good morning, Princess Jasmine. Did you sleep well in your castle last night?" Jasmine froze for a moment. Normally wary of strangers, she flushed at the gentle tone and the word princess. At breakfast, Jasmine clung tightly to her father's side. But Grace didn't push. She sat across the table, speaking about fairy tales, skillfully weaving Jasmine into the conversation. Slowly, the girl added shy replies, her eyes flickering with interest. But when David left for work, Jasmine burst into tears, clutching his leg. "Daddy, don't go!" David's chest tightened. He knelt, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I'll be back soon, I promise." His eyes met Grace's, silently pleading for her to give him hope. Grace knelt softly beside Jasmine and whispered, "How about we prepare a surprise for Daddy? When he comes home, we can draw him a beautiful picture." It wasn't a forced distraction. It was planting something for the child to look forward to. At last, Jasmine released her father and nodded faintly. The hours that followed tested Grace. Jasmine deliberately spilled juice, scattered toys across the room, and refused any activity. Yet Grace never raised her voice. She sat quietly beside her and said, "I know you miss Daddy. That feeling is very normal. When we're sad, it's okay to cry." Grace didn't try to stop the tears. She let Jasmine cry until calm returned. Then, for the first time in months, soft laughter echoed as they used toy horses to create a magical story together. That afternoon, when David returned, he froze at the sight. Jasmine and Grace sitting on the rug, smiling brightly over colorful drawings. Jasmine rushed into his arms, not clinging in desperation, but bursting with excitement. "Daddy, Grace and I made a magical story. Listen to it." David looked at his daughter, then at Grace. Gratitude and emotion welled in his eyes. For the first time after the darkness, laughter truly filled his home. And he knew Jasmine's healing had begun. In the days that followed, the once cold mansion filled with new sounds. Jasmine's pure laughter rang through the halls, mingled with Grace's gentle storytelling. To David, it was the most precious music. He began to notice that he watched Grace more often than necessary. When she knelt to Jasmine's eye level, when she patiently listened to every whimsical question, or when her bright laughter echoed as Jasmine proudly showed off a new drawing. Each moment etched itself deeply into his mind. One afternoon, David arrived home earlier than usual. He stopped at the garden porch where Jasmine and Grace were planting flowers in small pots. The golden sunset spilled across Grace's brown hair, making it glow. She bent down, guiding Jasmine's tiny hands to place the seeds, her smile so tender that David stood frozen, forgetting to step inside. Even dinners had changed. No longer lonely meals or business banquets. David now sat with his daughter and Grace. They shared small stories of the day, Jasmine drawing a winged horse, Grace accidentally burning a piece of toast. Amid the innocent laughter, David realized something profound. His true family was right there at that table. One evening, as Jasmine colored quietly, she suddenly looked up and asked innocently, "Daddy, why do you look at Miss Grace so much?" The question struck David speechless, while Grace flushed crimson, quickly lowering her head to shuffle the crayons. David cleared his throat awkwardly, avoiding his daughter's gaze, though his heart pounded wildly. That night, after Jasmine was asleep, David sat alone in the living room, reflecting. He had once sworn never to let his heart be wounded again after Anna. But Grace, she was different. She sought no status, no wealth. She carried only sincerity, simplicity, and the kind of love both Jasmine and he himself had long yearned for. Leaning back against the chair, David sighed. He knew he stood at a crossroads, continue down the path of fear, or open his heart to embrace a chance, the chance for something real. That night, after Jasmine had drifted into deep sleep, David sat quietly by her bedside, his eyes fixed on her peaceful little face. The soft glow of the night lamp fell across her rosy cheeks, and his heart ached. Memories surged back. He recalled the years of hardship when his career had barely begun and he had nothing but determination. His first wife, the woman he once believed would share his struggles, had walked away, leaving him and their infant daughter behind, claiming that love cannot feed a family. That betrayal carved a scar deep into David's heart, driving him to bury himself in work to fill the emptiness. Then came Anna, the second wife. By then, David was wealthy and successful, yet his choice had been another mistake. Anna never loved him, nor did she care for Jasmine. In her eyes, there was only power and wealth. Every smile, every sweet word had been nothing more than a mask for her insatiable greed. David bowed his head, fists tightening. 2 marriages, 2 wounds had nearly destroyed his faith in love. He had once sworn never to let his heart be vulnerable again. But tonight, as he watched Jasmine smile faintly in her dreams, a quiet question stirred within him. Perhaps fate was still offering him a chance, a new door to learn how to trust once more. In the days that followed, joy filled the mansion. Jasmine laughed more, running around with drawings and magical tales Grace inspired. Yet deep inside, David remained haunted. The happier he felt, the more terrified he became. The ghosts of his past, one wife who left him when he was poor, another who coveted his wealth, lingered, warning him that love could be a cruel trap. He began to watch Grace with suspicion. When she read the same story 5 times just to delight Jasmine, he wondered, is she trying too hard to win her over? When she refused extra pay, he thought, is this just a way to make herself look better to me? The unease gnawed at him daily, stealing his sleep. One night, after hours of tossing in bed, he made a decision. He would hire a private investigator to uncover Grace's past. The waiting was heavy, and tension thickened in the house until even Jasmine noticed. One evening, she climbed onto his lap and whispered, "Daddy, why don't you smile anymore? Did you and Miss Grace fight?" The innocent question left David speechless. When the report finally arrived, he opened it with trembling hands. Page after page revealed glowing praise. Families describing Grace as devoted, gentle, loving children as if they were her own. No trace of deceit, no blemish in her past. By the final page, David closed the file, both relieved and ashamed. He had let the shadows of his past nearly destroy the one person who had brought light to his daughter's life. That evening, as Grace tidied the kitchen, David approached her. His voice was low and hoarse. "Grace, I need to confess something. I had someone investigate you, not because you did anything wrong, but because I was too afraid after what I went through." Grace froze, her eyes shimmering with disappointment. Silence weighed heavily between them before she finally said softly, "I understand your past hurt you deeply, but if you cannot trust me, how can we ever build something real?" David bowed his head, fists tightening, his voice breaking. "I know I was wrong. Everything you've done has come from love for Jasmine, and I nearly ruined it all." Grace stayed quiet for a long moment, then gently placed her hand over his. "If there's to be a future, I ask only for one thing: trust. I don't want love laced with doubt, and Jasmine should never grow up in a home clouded by fear." In that moment, David understood. The true enemy wasn't his past, but the fear rooted in his own heart. And if he couldn't trust, he would lose everything. After their honest conversation in the kitchen, the atmosphere in the mansion began to shift. The invisible wall between David and Grace slowly dissolved. There were no rushed promises, only sincerity in the smallest gestures. David started noticing ordinary moments that stirred his heart. When Grace colored with Jasmine, he saw her patiently wait as the little girl chose each crayon, her gaze tender like a mother's. When she read bedtime stories, her soothing voice lulled Jasmine into peaceful dreams and calmed his own restless soul as well. Dinners became special. Jasmine chattered about her daytime adventures. Grace laughed softly, and David simply sat there, listening, savoring the simple peace he once believed he had lost forever. One evening, after Jasmine had fallen asleep, David and Grace sat in the living room, warm lamplight surrounding them. They spoke of childhood memories and struggles they had endured. Suddenly, David met her eyes, his heartbeat quickening. He reached out gently, brushing her cheek. "You're even more beautiful up close," he whispered. In that moment, the distance between them vanished. Grace closed her eyes, and their first kiss came. Tender, trembling, yet overflowing with unspoken promises. When they pulled apart, both were breathless, their hearts racing as though they had just stepped across a threshold. From that night on, their feelings blossomed day by day. They remained discreet around Jasmine, but their glances, their smiles, their quiet gestures spoke volumes. One morning at breakfast, Jasmine tilted her head curiously and asked, "Daddy, I see you smile more when you're with Miss Grace. Is it because she makes our home happier?" David paused, looking first at his daughter and then at Grace. He smiled softly and answered, "Yes, Princess, Grace makes this house full of happiness." Jasmine grinned brightly and returned to her cereal. But to David, her innocent words felt like a confirmation. Not only had he noticed the change, but so had his daughter. And that was the clearest proof that true love had begun to bloom within their home. As time passed, the bond between the three grew stronger. The once dark mansion now echoed with laughter. But a new challenge arose. David had to leave for a 3-day business trip. Just the thought of being away from Jasmine and Grace made him restless, repeating over and over while packing, "Everything will be okay, right?" Grace smiled gently, resting her hand on his shoulder. "Everything will be fine, David. I'll care for Jasmine as if she were my own. The two of us will be waiting for you." The words, "the two of us," echoed in David's heart, reminding him that his family was no longer just two. During those 3 days, Grace and Jasmine created sweet memories together. A picnic in the garden, princess movie nights trying to cook David's favorite dish as a surprise. One afternoon, while baking, Jasmine suddenly asked, "Grace, when will you marry Daddy? I want you to be my real mom." Grace was so startled she dropped the spoon. Sitting beside Jasmine, she hugged the little girl tightly. "Sweetheart, I love you very much, and I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Tears welled in her eyes, for in that innocent question lay the deep longing of a child who had lost too much. When David returned, Jasmine ran into his arms, chattering excitedly about her days with Grace. In David's heart, a decision solidified. Grace could no longer remain just a caretaker. He wanted her to be a permanent part of their family. A few days later, David and Jasmine secretly prepared. They decorated the backyard with fairy lights and rose petals scattered along the path. Jasmine was so excited, she kept asking, "Daddy, will Grace say yes? What if she cries because she's too happy?" David chuckled, hugging her close. "We're not proposing with just a ring. We're proposing with our hearts. I believe she'll say yes." That evening, after a warm family dinner, David invited Grace outside to watch the stars. As the lights flickered on, Grace gasped in wonder. Jasmine grabbed her hand, leading her to where David stood, holding a small ring. His voice trembled, but carried firm conviction. "Grace Williams, you've turned this house into a home, healed my daughter's heart, and taught me to believe in love again. Will you marry me and be Jasmine's mother?" Tears streamed down Grace's face. For a heartbeat, she could not speak, only the sound of her breath trembling in the night air. Then she knelt to Jasmine's level, embraced her tightly, and finally looked up at David through joyful tears. "Yes, I will. I'll marry you, and I'll be Jasmine's mother." Jasmine squealed, nearly bouncing with excitement. "Now I really have a mommy. We'll be a family forever." Months later, their wedding was held in that very garden. No lavish display, only the closest loved ones. Jasmine wore a tiny white dress, clutching a bouquet, her eyes shining with happiness. As David placed the ring on Grace's finger, he whispered, "I promise to protect you and Jasmine for the rest of my life." Grace replied, "I promise to be the safe haven for you and her always." Applause erupted, sealing their vows with a tender kiss. Jasmine threw her arms into the air, shouting gleefully, "We're a family forever!" In that moment, David knew the long years of pain had finally been laid to rest. Before him stretched a new journey, one of trust, of love, and of a home that would endure forever.